Oh, oof, lots to eat. Oh, hey, how's it going? So today's story is going to be about Garmin's. This is a Varia, and this is a 530 Edge. And sort of my love-hate relationship with these things and their mounts. Specifically, I've owned a 500, a 510, a 520, and now a 530, and this one's a replacement. Every one of them has failed on the flanges of the quarter turn mount. Here are my favorite quarter turn mounts. As you can see here, there's a tiny piece of plastic right here, a flange I'll call it. These, when you get in a crash, particularly when you're mountain biking and you have this thing sticking off the end of your bar, snap. Now, if that happens, you've got a couple of options. One of them is you can phone Garmin and maybe they'll replace the whole thing on a warranty, but I think you got to know someone. Number two is you might be able to order a new base piece off of Amazon and eBay, but to do that, you got to take the screen off. I tried this once and I ended up breaking the screen as I was extracting it, but I'm not an electronics technician. The next option you have is you can get these pieces. This is from a company called MagCAD, no affiliation. And you could end up epoxying this on. So it raises this a bit, but unfortunately then it blinds off the electrical connections if you want to run an extended battery or another accessory. If you're listening to this, Garmin, what I'd love to see you do is make this outer ring replaceable with these flange pieces. Either that or bolt a metal outer ring on this, so this is no longer the weakest part of the system, and you'll actually snap the plastic retainer in the mount. I can't speak a lot about integrated bars, but my research indicates that either you're going to get some flimsy mount that's fixed, or you're going to have to get some proprietary mount, which is adjustable, which, considering everything with these is proprietary and there's no universal standard for mounts, could end up being quite expensive. You're way better off with conventional bars where you can have many options. You can either put them on your stem, you can clamp them on the handlebar, heck, you could even put them on the top of the stem, or you can use, and I got a bag of them here, one of the just standard quarter turn mounts that gets put onto the bar. With mountain biking, and I'll get into this in a little bit more detail, typically you're putting it on your stem. You can put it on the frame on the top tube to really protect your Garmin, or you're using a quarter turn stock Garmin mount, which is actually what I recommend you do. The most simple and basic mount you can get with the Garmin can be a lifesaver sometimes. As an example, if you have a gravel bike and you're night riding, you put this on the stem rather than using the front mount so it doesn't interfere with your light. But basically this is how they mount. I'd recommend having enough tension, particularly for mountain biking, so that it doesn't move when you're going down rough trails. But if you actually get in a crash, it allows the Garmin to move on impact rather than snapping the flange that I love so much. These are by their age. Senior citizens on this side. This is an old Tate mount from probably back 10, 15 years ago. And then these are more recent Garmin mounts when Garmin basically said, well, let's make it compatible with 31.8 or any diameter down below. And these shims, let me tell you, are a pain in the arse. The other thing that's not so great about them is if you get in a crash, this can't move up and down. So once again, you could be snapping your flange, although you are sheltered in between the extensions of your road bars. This one here You can see the difference in the generations. I think this one, they were really going far out front with it, but Garmin actually realized that they needed to drop the computer down level with the handlebar, the top of it. And this is the one I'm using on my current WindSpace build. I think the pinnacle of design is the stem-mounted ones where there's a groove in the front of the stem or a slot, and this can be adjusted up and down. They're extremely light because you don't need to have anything clamp around your handlebar. And finally, my least favorite design is the ones where you use them as part of the faceplate of the stem, or they attach to the bolts on either the top or bottom of the faceplate of the stem. And a lot of times they aren't adjustable at all, and you know as well as I do, you need that perfect angle. So this to me is not a very good idea. They're also, I'm not going to weigh this one in the weigh-in, but if you take the weight of this very heavy cap, this adds about 40 grams to your total weight. One thing you should be aware of is make sure you have enough space between your Garmin and your stem so that you're actually able to operate the buttons. As an example, this Tate Labs one is in the box because you can't actually touch the buttons on the 530 when you're riding because it's too tight. Here are the Varia mounts I have. These are stock mounts that come with a Varia, and this is an aftermarket one by MagCAD. So this is Garmin's attempt to solve the variable seat post diameter, cross section, etc. You can see there's aerofoil type sections, there's sections for D-type, but it's put on by this O-ring strap, and they're not very stable, and they're quite annoying and heavy. The next option here is Garmin provides an option for round seat posts, but it's rather ugly looking, and they give you these various spacers depending on the diameter of your seat post, but a heck of a lot more stable than this. And finally, the MagCAD option, and they make these for various bikes and various sections of seat posts. This seems quite nice. I'd be concerned about over tightening it. My only complaint is this bolt that sticks out on it. Considering how much money they charge, that should be a flush mount to make it look sleeker on your sexy superbike. Also, I'll mention is don't over tighten these, especially because they're 3D printed and they'll tend to snap. They're stiffer than regular plastic, at least in my opinion. And if you get in a crash, at least it allows it to move. But put it tight enough so that it doesn't go up and down the seat post. Now let's look at what caused the death of my most recent 530 before this one. As you can see, this sticks out proud of the stem and handlebar if you have a crash. This is a relatively high quality one made by K-Edge. The thing is, it's so damn rigid that you're gonna break at the flange. Now, if you're doing this, I'd recommend either going with one that mounts straight onto the top cap or run it this way. Also, if you're doing an enduro, there's mounts that you can actually just put down on your top tube right here. The other thing is, and the reason why I went with this one and had it mounted up front, is I used the one-up tool which goes down the steer. So obviously putting a cap on doesn't work. Mountain bike 1 with a quarter turn. This is my winter aluminum hardtail. Mountain bike 2, a high tower. And just as a note, I'm really thinking about mounting one here for when I go to the bike parks with this thing. And mountain bike 3, a Blur 4. And this is where I killed my last 530. You can see I got an EDC tool here. So the computer was mounted on this during a crash. A picture is worth 1,000 words. I'm not sure if there was a design meeting between the specialized lightweight handlebar division and the specialized Garmin mount division. Who comes up with this stuff? This is the simplest thing you can do for your mountain bike stem mount if you don't have one of these steerer mounted tools. If you really want to make sure that your Garmin is protected, this is what a lot of enduro racers use. I think this one's from 76 Designs. The simplest advice, if you're using a rigid mount, is to keep it behind the front of the stem. Light me up in the comments if you disagree, but I believe cantilevering out all this weight on the bottom bolts of your expensive stem is Darwinian-esque in design, and I'm not talking in a good way. In a crash, or even if you knock this thing over in your garage, you may actually damage your stem. Engineers at Extralight came up with a much better design. In the case of a crash, or you flipping this thing over in your garage, it's likely going to fail right here, saving your relatively expensive stem. Here's an example of a design of an integrated handlebar mount that will be as flexible as the average public pool diving board. Weight weenies time! Garmin universal mount for the Varia with the 27.2. Garmin round seat post mount with the shim for a 27.2. And finally, the 3D printed mount for 27.2. Let's go to the true champion, the standard Garmin quarter turn mount. Next, Easton EC90 stem front mount, another champion. That K-Edge mountain bike mount. Tate Labs front mount. The current Garmin mount I use, which came with the 530. And now we're getting into the real issues. The Garmin mount, I think this was a Generation 1. And the champion, the Garmin extended mount. This must be for like a Garmin 1000 or 130 or whatever they have now. But to put this in perspective, the Garmin 530 doesn't weigh much more. Neither does the Varia. Let's look at the 4 pillars of what I've talked today. First of all, is it compatible? Is your Garmin going to actually fit in the mount so you can access the buttons? Second of all, think about whether or not it'll survive a crash, particularly if you're a mountain biker. For your road bikers, it's a little bit less of an issue. Think about the stability. As an example, I'd said use the simplest, cheapest Garmin mount that you basically just strap to your handlebars. Well, that's got to remain in place for you. If it moves around, it may actually become a distraction and potentially could cause a crash. And finally, the suitability for what you're doing. So if you're a cross-country mountain bike racer and you're looking at your data all the time, then you're certainly not going to mount your Garmin in a safe place on the top tube. Another thing is, if you're a road rider, of course you want it out front, and it's kind of sheltered between the bars. So just think about suitability. The last thing you want to be doing is looking down or in an odd place for your data, because that actually could be more dangerous than wrecking your Garmin if you consider your health and well-being. So just food for thought. A final point. Back in the old days,
we practiced unsafe Garmining. What I'm talking about is a Prince George, British Columbia pothole. Popped my computer out of the mount when Matt failed to do the right thing and pointed out in a pace line. A couple years later, Garmin came up with the tether. And what I'm recommending young men is, regardless of how quick your ride is, always use protection.
That's all I have for you today on Garmin mounts. So if you like my content, feel free to like it. Feel free to subscribe. If you got a comment, put her down below. With that, ride hard.